Welcome to Nonprofit Nation, the series that highlights the meaningful work nonprofits are doing to strengthen our community. In each episode, we speak with leaders, volunteers, and advocates addressing real-world changes and creating impactful solutions. Join us as we explore their stories, the obstacles they face, and the measurable change they bring to people and causes they serve. Welcome back, folks, to Nonprofit Nation. I am your host, Amanda Pierce, excited to introduce our guest today. I am joined by Angela Dykes, and she is the Executive Director of the Baldridge Lodge.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
And I'll let Angela tell us what Baldridge Lodge does.
Yeah, so Baldridge Lodge is a nonprofit, as you said, that serves teenage boys and young men who've been affected by various kinds of trauma. We have three main programs. Our group home serves teenage boys who have been mostly removed from their biological homes because of abuse, neglect, and other kinds of traumas. Occasionally we have young men that are there for delinquency issues, but that's actually very rare these days. That's more of our historical reason for being, but we're now serving almost 100% kids in foster care. And then we have a program called the Independent Living Program, which helps young men that are transitioning out of foster care. So once they turn 18, they have the option to stay in foster care till they turn 21. But we have this sort of transitional program where they don't just have to leave the, complete care of being in foster care and at the lodge and go completely out on their own 100%, from one day to the next. This allows them the chance to start to become independent while still having some support financially and emotionally and with case management. And then over time, they start to take on more of the responsibilities themselves. So, after they've been there a couple months, they pay $100 towards the rent. And then, a little bit longer, it goes up. Meanwhile, our case manager, we call him a life coach, is helping them learn to budget and helping them maybe, find a job that's more career focused as opposed to just like, a job, something that can be a long-term support for them. And so, over time they become ready to be completely independent and move on, to the kind of the future. So that's our second program. Our third program is what we call aftercare. And essentially we serve any young man that's been in either of our residential programs. So if you've ever lived at Baldridge Lodge, you can always call Baldridge Lodge. There's, we can provide referrals, resources, just kind of moral support. I kind of think of it like my own child, is now a young adult. And so he calls or texts and says, how do I wash this, random piece of clothing or my bedspread, that kind of thing. And we have answers for that, And so if we have young men that, generally they have probably more bigger issues than just how to wash something, but they could call for that too. And, we would try to help them. But, I need a job or I need help with, figuring out how to get my Social Security card or, did my Medicaid run out? What do I have to do again to keep that going until I turn 26? Those kinds of things. And we're there for them really forever. So
that's so comforting to know. I wrote down you're always one call away, essentially. Mm-hmm. Because that support system and that community is so essential to have a feeling of belonging.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's what you create for the fellas. What do you refer to them as?
Sometimes we say the boys, sometimes we say the young men, the guys. It just depends on, what's going on that day.
Now talk to me about staff, and support. Yeah. So you have a facility, a campus where people live on site. And what does that look like? I'm picturing kind of like a dormitory. So is there a supervisor?
Yeah. So with the boys, we have 12 young men that live in the group home, and that's our physical building is the group home. And that's also where our offices are located. And to care for those boys, we have several people in the position that we call youth care specialist. So that is a group of people that are working on rotating shifts. So we actually don't have adults that live in the building full time, but we always have at least 2 adults on shift working with the boys. They're there to care for them, make sure that they're, following the routine and just, their daily lives and interactions. And so there's quite a few people in that position. We have a lot of people that work part-time, a few that are full-time in that position, but to cover 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, you need a lot of people to cover all those hours. And we always have 2 on staff for the ratio. We have to have 1-to-8 ratio for adults to young men. So these guys have a lot of people in their lives that care about them. But it's not the same as a family, if you will, a foster family but it is, we try to make it as family-like and home-like as we can. We're really going for, normalcy for these guys. A lot of their childhood and growing up years, and even once they came into the foster care system, a lot of them have not had normal, opportunities. And so we're really going for, attending regular school, being able to do extracurricular activities, getting driver's license, getting a job, buying a car, all of those kinds of things that are kind of those normal teenage milestones. That's what we want for them. And so it requires a lot of support to get them there, maybe more so than it would, just a young man that, my own child maybe was maybe a little bit easier because just of his circumstances. But these guys kind of have that underlying baseline of difficulties in childhood and traumas that they've experienced. And so it makes doing some of the normal things just a little bit more challenging for them. And then, we're here to support them in moving forward with that. So.
Are the guys, are they in the local schools? Are they, okay.
Yeah, for the most part, they're attending our local Forsyth County schools, and we, just depending on their needs, they may go to one high school or another, or one junior high or middle school or another. But yeah, the school system works so well with us and really helps us get the guys what they need. There's never enough foster homes. There's never enough, people to care for the young men anybody that comes into foster care. It's there's always more need. So.
The mission of Baldridge Lodge is to provide safe and stable support to young men in the group home, independent living program, and community-based services in a manner that nurtures the youth, strengthens healthy relationships, and aids young men in their transition to adulthood. This is accomplished through a partnership with caregivers and the community seeking to care for its own.
At the group home, we can take young men that are as young as 12, and then they can stay in the group home until they're 21. But once they turn 18, they're really starting to think about, their future and how are they going to transition and become a self-sufficient adult. Like that's where that begins. But when a young person is brought into foster care, the DFACS worker, right, is basically looking for a place that can meet their needs. A lot of times that is Baldridge Lodge, especially when you have a teenage boy that comes into foster care in this area. We're one of the first calls. But a lot of times we get young men that have been in the foster care system for several years, and they've been bouncing from, say, a foster home to another foster home. Maybe there were some problems, some behavior problems or something there, and they ended up having to move again, those kinds of things. And so one of our goals is to be the last placement that they live in before they have what we call permanency. So permanency could be returning to their biological family. It could be getting adopted. It could be some sort of permanent guardianship situation, or it could be aging out and being their own, adult. And what we're seeing, kind of the trend is that we're seeing more and more young men coming into foster care, not being reunified just because the situations are so significant. The problems that the family's addressing are really hard to overcome. And so they end up with us not only for longer periods of time, but they're older as, they get older with us. And so we're really focusing on kind of two things right now. One is preparing them for adulthood. That's where the independent living program comes in. So if they're, have turned 18 and they're living in the group home, we're starting to talk about, okay, what are you going to do when you graduate from high school? What's your plan? What do you want to do? And, looking at that independent living program as a resource for them to make that transition. But the other thing that we're doing more and more of, or wanting to do more and more of really, is helping the young men in our care find permanency before they age out. Because even if they do age out, and when they do age out, they still need that permanent connection with someone, you know, whether it's a mentor, a family member, maybe it's an aunt or a grandmother, you know, a cousin that, you know, they didn't have contact with until, you know, they came into foster care. But yeah, so we're just trying to help do some deep dives into who could be their person, you know, and we're happy to be that for them, but it's even better when it's a lifelong connection that they, you know, have some kind of affinity with, you know, that's beyond the staff. Yeah.
So how could someone get involved with that? It sounds kind of like, you know, mentor me or big brother type deal. Would that just be on an individual personal basis, or is that more structured than you guys offer? So
we do have some volunteers, and we have a volunteer coordinator who'd be happy to talk to anybody about, you know, their interest. And there's really a full array of ways that people can volunteer. I mean, anything from mentoring, you know, one-on-one with one of our guys, kind of in a Big Brothers Big Sisters style kind of thing, or just you know, coming in and being present with the whole group, you know, getting to know and play some games, eat dinner with them, those kinds of things. That's kind of the highest involvement level is the mentoring. But we also have people who make meals and drop them off, or you know, order food and send it over from a restaurant, right? I mean, if you can imagine 12 teenage boys in a house and how much food we go through. So food is always welcome. And that is one of the biggest ways that volunteers help us, is like, you know, gathering food, collecting food, bringing food, making food. And then we have kind of an in-between thing where we have some people that love making food and they love hanging out with the boys. And so they'll come in and they'll make food with the boys.
That's fun.
In fact, I think just yesterday we had a volunteer came in and help the boys make cookies that then on Thursday this week they're delivering to Treat the Troops. Oh. And so, you know, so there's lots of ways to kind of connect that way. We have groups that will come in sometimes, you know, from like businesses that will have a volunteer day, and they'll say, what project do you need? And we're like, well, we've got this shed that needs to be cleaned out, or this room that needs to be painted, you know, those kinds of things. We are also ways that, you know, kind of can do a one time or, you know, once a year kind of a volunteer where you don't have to go through a whole background check to, you know, have that done. So
what about resources? So going back, you put it into perspective of how much groceries the young fellows could put away, and likewise they grow like weeds. Clothing, shoes,
we
personal
actually,
items.
We do not take donations of clothing anymore. Mainly because we have a lot of other resources, and we'd rather those resources be funneled to, you know, the places like some of our local thrift stores that a lot of times will allow us to shop for free for the guys. But hygiene, toiletries, you know, yes, please send deodorant, you know, all of that. Toilet paper, like paper towels,
laundry detergent.
Absolutely.
Okay. So they have on-site laundry.
Yeah, absolutely. The way I always say it is anything that you can think of that a family and or a small business would need, that's something that we need at Baldridge Lodge, you know? So it's like pest control, paper towels, copy paper, because we have a copy machine, because it's our offices as well, you know, but also healthy snacks and, you know, activities for the boys and things like that. So
now you have such a nurturing quality about you. You are a mom, correct?
I am.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you have any boys of your own?
I do. I have one boy of my own. He is 20. And when I started at the lodge, he was about the same age as they were, going through high school. And I think that was one of the things that kind of drew me to this position too, was that it sort of brought a lot of things in my history together in one job, which was great.
That's what I was going to ask you next. Yeah. So share with our listeners your passion behind this mission and how you got connected with Baldridge Lodge so that you can lead the organization.
Sure. So I've been a social worker for over 30 years, and a lot of my background is in working with kids in foster care. I also worked with Big Brothers Big Sisters actually in Texas for a while, and some other youth development organizations. So in the summer of 2019, my family moved from the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas to this area for my husband's job. And between July and January of that year, you know, the next year I was looking for a position, and I came across Baldridge Lodge. And it really did kind of, like I said, bring together all all of the things in my past, resume that it just seemed like a perfect fit. And fortunately they agreed and offered me that job. But I started in January of 2020. And so, 2 months later, the world was completely different. Everything was, not what we had expected. And so, I forged my own path. I mean, I think it was helpful that I was new because I didn't know how it was, quote unquote, supposed to be. And so we could just, figure it out as we went. And it's been a really wonderful journey. I'm really happy to be there and, plan to be there for a long time. So
you said 3 words that stood out to me. Forge your path. Mm-hmm. Let's take that and apply it to how you lead this organization and how you empower these young men to do just that. Mm-hmm. Talk about some success stories. Talk about how you empower these young men to forge their own path and to be great leaders, not only within our community, but also the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first one that came to mind is a young man that actually he came to the lodge for the first time in 2020 during lockdown. And he was 17 at the time, had been in a number of other group homes. I think had been on runaway status just prior to joining us. And he walked in and within, a few days, I think he basically said, I like it here. This is better than other places I've been. I'm going to stay and you're going to have to kick me out when I turn 21. And we were like, oh, haha, so cute, so funny, and he continued. Yeah. So he continued to live with us. He was not a fan of school. He had not been in for a while. We put him on a path to get his GED. He did that within a couple of months. Such a smart guy, barely had to study, just took the test and, had his diploma or whatever they call it with a GED, got a full-time job working retail, not too far away, and really just settled in and was, living his best life. And this was a young man who had experienced a lot of abuse. He also had some mental health issues. And he was concerned, I think, about just his ability to be independent, but he, continued to do well, do fine, and kind of would rise to the bar that we would, set for him, right? And so, believe it or not, he actually stayed until very close to his 21st birthday. So we were like, oh, how's he going to do? Is he going to be able to be independent? We were talking to him about it. We were thinking about it, and we had just opened the independent living program. This is 2023. Our first resident moved in September of 2023, and this young man was going to turn 21 in November of 2023. And we were like, we got to figure something out for him. Let's see if he can do this. So about 3 weeks before his birthday, we moved him into the independent living program, and we were amazed because he rose to the challenge, right? He didn't drive, and there were some very good reasons for that. We were a little concerned that he would be able to get himself to his job every day without the staff at the lodge driving him, because at independent living you got to figure it out yourself. And he never missed a day. I mean, he worked it out with some Uber people. He had kind of the same Uber driver, and eventually they sort of went offline, and were like, how about you just be my driver and let me just pay you directly? And so anyway, he was doing well. And like I mentioned before in the independent living program, after a few months that we, have them start paying towards their expenses. And so he always paid his rent on time. When we bumped up the level for him, he would meet that as well. And finally, it would have been 2024, about a year later, he was about to have to pay what would have been almost the full amount of his rent in that current location. And it was like it flipped something in his mind, like, oh, I can do this. And he decided that it was time to move out, go on his own. He had a sibling that was living not too far, a little bit further than, it wasn't local, but he was still in Georgia. And so he moved out to be closer to his brother, and he checks in periodically with us, and he's doing great. So,
that is fantastic.
Yeah.
You've created such a welcoming environment that everybody wants to stay.
Yes.
That's like, yes. Now, out of curiosity, maybe we'll call it a graduate, someone that successfully, within your 6-ish years, just a round number, how many graduates have you, how many chickadees have successfully flown the coop and are flying? And you mentioned that you guys are just one call away, but do you guys keep up with them, stay in touch?
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but like I said, we don't have a lot of turnover because we do have kids right now that stay for a long time and have been there for a long time. But I would say there's probably been around 10-ish that have graduated or, launched, as we like to call it, either from the group home or from the independent living program. We do keep in touch. We have, like I said, our aftercare program, and our aftercare specialist checks in at least every 6 months, but, sometimes a little sooner than that, just depending on what's going on. But yeah, we have some that we have a lot that we would call success stories, right? But they're not the big flashy, oh, he's at Harvard now and he's, et cetera, et cetera. But we do have some that, one at least that's in the military doing well. But honestly, my biggest success story in my mind is they're working. They're not in jail. Yes. There's no, babies, right? that we're not taking care of. Yeah, exactly. And they're comfortable reaching back out and answering when we call to let us know how they're doing. Right. And so I think just, it's just they're on their own and they're making it. And that's
testament
important.
To success.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to bring up, because as we are here in May is actually Foster Care Awareness Month, which you made me aware of. Yes. So I'd like for you to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a national thing that happens every year. And they usually have a theme, but it's really just a month where we, try to focus on foster care and the needs of people in foster care, young people in foster care. The theme this year I thought was a really good one because it really does connect with what we do at the Lodge. It says, engaging youth, building supports, and strengthening opportunities. And that's really what we need and what they need. And one of the things that's really disturbing to me about young people that are in foster care is that when they leave foster care, just the national statistics are really terrible. So I actually have a few written down. I'm going to read them to you. So 1 in 5 young people that leave foster care become homeless within between the ages of 17 and 19. So 1 in 5 become homeless. 20%, which is about that, become homeless the minute they leave foster care. Like they just leave and they don't have a place to go. Right. 1 in 5 are incarcerated. 1 in 10 experience early parenting, maybe before they intended to. Only 2/3 have their high school diploma by age 21. And only about 57% are full or part-time employed by age 21. So there's just a lot of challenges that they face leaving, and which is one of the reasons why we really wanted to do our independent living program to, help with that transition, because that's part of the issue is that one day you're in foster care and the state is taking care of everything. The next day you're on your own and you're taking care of everything, and there's no segue in between. Yeah. So just bringing awareness to the community of, the need for foster parents, the need for adoptive parents, the need for people to support organizations like Baldridge Lodge that are taking care of a group of foster kids that aren't necessarily going to be, first pick of a new foster parent,
Let's be realistic with our audience.
Yeah.
Because I speak very realistically to them.
Yeah.
What does it cost monthly, roundabout number, to keep the homes, lights on, food in the fridge, just a ballpark paid. Number?
Yeah. About $100,000
a month. $100,000 a month to all of our listeners out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of, if you feel inclined to contribute, you can visit www.baldridgelodge.org.
There's a donate button right on the front page. And we've, in the current economic times, as everybody always refers to, I mean, we've already experienced, some loss of revenue because of that. We didn't have any direct federal grants or anything, but sort of some indirect funding. Where we've been notified it's going to be gone in next year, about $10,000. Some of our other, funder foundations, those kinds of things, the portfolios that they're donating from are going down. We've had donors that have lost jobs and had to stop, their monthly gifts, those kinds of things. And so it's a tough time for people in the nonprofit space. But we also have, I'll just say, we have really generous donors and people that support us and have stepped up even maybe beyond what they would normally do, knowing that we're in a tough time. We have the best supporters, the best community. We believe that we'll be okay.
Yes,
but
God willing.
we gotta get the word out that we're in need as well.
Couple follow-up questions. So if anybody happens to be listening and they might be in a position to connect with you for help themselves, are there any parameters? Does one of the young fellas have to be a Forsyth County resident?
That's a great question. So I will say for our group home, they do need to be in foster care. So, we don't take it's called private placements where like a family's like, I'm having trouble with my teen. That's not what we do. They need to be involved in the system, right? So that would be a referral from the DFACS case manager. But our independent living program, actually a little less than a year ago, we expanded our eligibility for that program from just young men that are transitioning out of foster care, and also are now including young men between the ages of 18 and 25 who are finding themselves homeless in our Forsyth County community. Because homelessness and foster care are so entwined, we felt like that made a lot of sense to, if there's a young man in this area that is in need of this same service, to help, make that transition to self-sufficiency, that we would be, happy to do that. So some of our current independent living program residents were formerly homeless in the area, not necessarily in foster care. So, so that's our eligibility there. And then the aftercare is, of course, anybody who has been in one of our programs is who we can help there. We do get calls periodically for people that are, struggling with their young person in their home, or know a young person who's in need. And we're happy to, help somebody direct them to some places that might be able to give some tangible assistance. So.
Tell me about what you guys do within the community with other nonprofits, because I was at Teacher Reuse Exchange earlier this year, and some of your guys were loading and unloading some supplies.
Yeah.
So unless you subcontract them out for heavy lifting, because I could use them for some help, what is that relationship like, and how do you kind of plug in?
Yeah. So we really want to kind of impress upon the guys that they are fortunate to be where they are. I know that they've been through some hard times, but they're taken care of. They have what they need, and we want them to learn to give back, just because we think that's a great value. And so, well before my time as executive director, once a month, the boys from the group home have worked with a food distribution ministry that is in town. And they go and basically unload, frozen food and snacks and whatnot. And people that need food drive through, and they're helping to hand that out. They're among many other volunteers that work with them. But we also, love to get them involved in other nonprofits. They have worked with Teacher Reuse, as you've mentioned. They've volunteered at For Kids. We have a connection with the place. They do an annual summer youth internship, and seems like for the last several summers, at least one of our young men has been part of that. So they're providing something for our guys, and they're helping with the work that they do there. There's and we have kids that are in the Mentor Me program, and that kind of thing as well. So it's sort of beneficial back and forth with a lot of the other organizations.
I like to call it the serve cycle.
Yes.
You're serving. And I love that you are, you're helping them understand the importance of giving back, which I'm sure they already do.
Yeah.
Angela, for our listeners who feel moved to participate or want to learn more, what's the best way that they could do so?
I would say check out our website. There's a really great video on the homepage that gives a good overview of our group home program. But also there's a contact us page. Type that in, it comes straight to my email. You can say what you're interested in. If you want to volunteer, I'll connect you with our volunteer coordinator, Wendy Cates. If you want to donate, we can, talk about how and when and, that kind of thing. If you have a business that provides a service that you would like to offer to us, we're, again, happy to hear about all of that, but they can absolutely reach us through the website. It's probably the easiest way. They're also welcome to email me directly at adykes@baldridgelodge.org.
I was just thinking about like pathway opportunities because you were talking about them getting jobs and things like that. Do you look to partner with like the Christian Brothers or maybe, Roto-Rooter? Like if you have a technical company and you're looking for applicants?
Yeah. So definitely looking for businesses locally that would be open to considering our guys for employment. I will say we have a wide range of skills, intellect, etc. In fact, something that's kind of become more and more of a what we do is working with young adults that have intellectual disabilities. And so, we might have a young person who is very physically able and very much high achiever in school and could jump in and learn and do any job. But then we're also going to have some that really need that oversight and almost like not quite a sheltered working situation, but
supported work environment.
Yeah, support. Yeah, just someone an employer that understands this young person, even if he doesn't have a diagnosed intellectual disability, but he does have some trauma. And there's they may interact in ways that are unexpected sometimes. And so, just a regular employer just off the street, these guys may not always be the one that's chosen. Right. But if you have an employer that really has a heart for foster kids or just wants to help in some kind of way and that, and they need employees and they're willing to put in a little bit of support, I think we could definitely be a possible connection.
Okay.
Yeah.
And talking about like the fundamentals, I'm reaching way back for what we did in school. I assume that some like maybe resume building. Do people still write resumes?
They do.
I do. I still have a resume and I own my own business.
Right.
So do you help them create a successful resume and prepare for those interviews and things like that too?
Yeah, absolutely. We have two employees that are, we call our case managers or human service professional is their role, but they work with the guys on those kinds of things, life skills, wherever we really do try to meet the boys where they are. So if we have one who just needs to work on, hygiene and taking a shower every day, they'll make a chart and they'll, check it off and, have a whiteboard or something that, gives them credit for that. But we have others that are truly, high achievers and they're, doing extracurriculars and trying to get a job and thinking about college and those kinds of things. And so they're working with them on, what do you need to do? What's your next step? What experience this summer could you have that we could add to your resume and, those kinds of things. And so, yeah, it's like I said, it's very interesting because there's such a wide range. Like we literally are working on, getting dressed and changing your clothes every day all the way up to what's going to be on my college, applications kind of thing. So and everything in between.
So many exciting things I know are ahead for these young men. And for those of you listening, again, if you'd like to learn more, baldridgelodge.org, and you can contact Angela directly by emailing her at adikes@baldridgelodge.org. Any final thoughts?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me and for letting me tell, whoever's listening about Baldridge Lodge. It's a wonderful program and we really appreciate the support of our community.
Yes, and thank you guys for all of your hard work and dedication. We'll give a shout out to our friend Wendy, who she will be listening. We're going to corral her on air one day. I wanted to ask you quickly, because if it was 12 girls living in a dormitory style, it'd be pretty dramatic. Do the guys have much drama? I mean, it's funny. Everybody's, they're bros and they get along?
There's a lot of bro stuff happening, and it's interesting because I grew up with sisters, so I do know about the girl drama, right? But the boys, like, they will have a little scuffle, and then it's like they forgot about it 5 minutes later. Like, you want to go play basketball? You know, like, yeah, it's like it's over so quickly, you know?
Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, Angela, I look forward to following along with your success. Congratulations to you and the organization for all the headway that you have made and are continuing to make.
Thank you so much.
Visit AmandaPirch.com to learn more about purpose-driven podcasting. Special thanks to our partners at Commercial Capital Limited for supporting the Nonprofit Nation podcast series. Commercial Capital Limited is your one-stop shop for commercial financing needs. Visit commercialcapitalltd.com to learn more about the types of programs and loans that they fund, types of properties they finance, and the documents needed to underwrite and process a loan in under 48 hours. Contact the experts at 770-908-1672 or email the team info@commercialcapitalltd.com.